right. Hi, and welcome to the Skeptical Leftist Podcast, the show where I talk to a variety of people to spread critical thinking, progressive politics, and left-wing philosophy. And today I'm joined by Owen MacDonald. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I mean, I think we spoke very briefly last year in a different stream, but say briefly, it was a good stream.
Yeah.
But it's nice to talk again. It's nice to be amongst fellow left-wing voices. I feel like sometimes amongst all the noise of the world, it's important just to take a step back from the media outlook and sort of be amongst the fellow left-wing people.
Yeah, for sure. And like on your channel, like you have a YouTube channel, you talk to right-wingers a lot, which I imagine would be exhausting.
It's got its charms. I mean, I must say, you do feel it almost feels like just baffling that you can be amongst people who hold such I don't say backwards beliefs, really, like just completely alien to how you'd expect people to be. But it's quite it's insightful, but exhausting too. It's you do sometimes think, wow, I just need to just put this to a side. So no, I'm very grateful to have a break from that. And talk to some like-minded people. No,
that's awesome. So I guess for viewers of my channel, they may not know much about you. So what do you kind of want anybody to know about you?
Okay, so like yourself, I'm quite left-wing. I quite like the idea of spreading progressive voices and being someone who is openly critical of our deeply flawed system and deeply flawed current political climate. But I do that in a way that explores the right-wing world, I'd like to think, by speaking to various people on the right and by challenging some of their ingrained worldviews in a manner that's less shouty and abrasive as some of the sort of, I guess you call it debate bros, right? I try not to be too toxic or too, I'm so amazing on my channel. It's more just a casual space in which various conversations are had. And at the same time as right-wing conversations, it's also a place where I like to speak to left-wing people like yourself, like others around the scene, and just gain an understanding of the world through people who live within it. So on the channel, loads of streams, loads of just nice, relaxed videos from a perspective of a British left-wing person.
That's cool. No, that's awesome. I can't say that I watch a lot of your stuff because listening to right-wingers makes me crazy. I live I live in Saskatchewan. It's deeply, deeply conservative. So I live among these people. I work with these people that I see the world like diametrically opposite, basically. And I don't expose myself to a lot of extra stuff, is what I'm saying.
Well, it's interesting because I try to pick like a palette, almost like a sample of right-wing stuff. But as anyone who's ever watched a right-wing video on YouTube or any platform will know, the second you do, your recommendations just end up inundated with just bile. Like you watch one video and then suddenly it's, Trump has eliminated the corruption, the deep state have been beaten every single time. And then, it's even worse. I don't really use Twitter much anymore, but the place is accessible. Like you don't even need to follow them. I got a notification from Elon Musk telling me that the more laws you have, the worse society is. You only need apparently a few laws, which are convenient if you're a tech billionaire trying to rifle through some cheap contracts, right?
Yeah, oddly enough, they always think that the lower and middle classes, working class people need more laws over our bodies and the way we live. But of course, there should be zero laws over business and how they interact with things, right?
Of course, the free market, the free of people, or the free of the capitalist, at least.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I actually was writing 99% of what I write and work on and research never makes it onto anything public. But I've been working on this big project where completely debunking the idea that capitalism can ever be libertarian or even separate from the state. Like they need the state in order to exist.
Well, exactly. Right. Exactly. I mean, it's funny you say that because I was speaking to someone the other day who believed the exact opposite, that once you get rid of the state, the free market can truly come into existence and the private business corporate world can liberate the people and deliver all the best services.
That is absolutely not how anything works.
It's staggering, isn't it? But I suppose it speaks to that sense of the fact that capitalism, as well as being an economic system, is an ideology. At least
Right.
people believe that their freedom comes through economic liberty because they've been told that by the media, their politicians. And that's not to make the sort of typical, everyone else is a mindless sheep and I know the world. But in the same way, the sort of the cultural capital that capitalists have, where they're, as Elon Musk does, buying a social media platform and inundating it with right-wing nonsense, cable networks and such, and the fact that every form of media basically is dominated by, well, I say dominated, is heavily present and afflicted with right-wing media. It makes it hard to avoid. And if you're not being critical, then it's easy to start believing the stuff yourself.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's been pretty well established ever since, like, at least before Chomsky wrote Manufacturing Consent, right? Like, that you have to have money in order to have a media outlet. And therefore the opinions and views of those with money are going to be the ones that we hear and see every day. And that's, hundreds of years that we've been getting that fed to us. And
exactly.
We're swimming in capitalist indoctrination, right? Like, that's what the world is.
I mean, even just with just basic stuff, like the fact that you can't go through your day without being confronted with by advertisements and marketization, and even just your hobbies. Like I would never call myself a proper pianist, but I play a bit of piano.
Sure.
And sometimes I'll go online and I'd like to watch and listen to a few pieces and stuff. And even that is like, how can you get better? How can you become the next big thing? How can you marketize it? And it's sad because ultimately it's just a form of art. Like I don't need to be the next Beethoven to
right. Yeah.
to just go about my life, right?
But the idea is that if you're not making money off of it, then it's not worth doing.
Yeah. It's sad. It is sad because I think it really showcases as well just how the right-wing mind can't really enjoy a lot of things, right? Like it has to be some big money-making scheme. It has to be the biggest and the best, and if it's not, then get rid of it and bin it off for something new. And it means that they can't. I think it's why bit of a tangent, but it's why a lot of like right-wing art and media doesn't really find success. I mean, I know it's easy to
that's why it sucks. Yeah.
Exactly right. I mean, I know we would say that because we're left-wing, but like you look at all those Hollywood is bad and evil and communist, even which is on the face
nonsense.
Comment, right? But you look at what's Shapiro's network? Is it the Daily Wire? Do they
Daily
have like,
Wire? Yeah. Right.
Like, you look at their program, and it's like, who would choose to watch this? Once you get past the leftists are evil and scum and their jokes, what's there? Like it's all just vitriol and negativity, and that doesn't hold people, right?
Yeah, it's like the movies that were made off of like Atlas Shrugged. Like they're polemical and like they're preachy and they have no substance for real. They just talk about how over and over again how poor people bad, government interference bad, rich people good, and that's over and over. Like that's the whole thing. And it's like,
exactly.
Well, why is this interesting? This isn't even interesting.
And I think you really see it because obviously, counter to what they say, Hollywood's full of different opinions, and there's plenty of conservatives in Hollywood and plenty of very bad practices that sort of showcase why capitalist economics aren't good for art. But amongst the sort of, because obviously actors tend to be a bit more liberally and tend to, once you're engaging with art on a critical level, you tend to be a little bit more reflective and progressive. But you get your Kevin Sorbo's and your James Woods and your Mel Gibsons, and there's plenty of actors there who are conservative. And it's telling that when they decide, I'm going to go and join the right-wing culture war media's bubble and go and make right-wing art, it just falls apart. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the like evangelical, extreme Christian fundamentalist like films, like
God's Not Dead.
God's Not Dead. There you are. Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Where it's like purely made to convince right-wing people they have to be openly. The atheists are bad. We're right. We've got to be a certain sort of Christian. You've got to fight the state and join us. It's just awful. But you only enjoy it if you're enjoying the culture war, if you're engaged in that element of society, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you watch it because you agree with it already, right? Like, you don't watch it because you're like, we'll see what they have to say. Maybe they have some good points.
It's a fascinating watch, by the way. I mean, Kevin Sorbo's character in that film. Have you seen it? It's
I haven't watched it on my own, but I've heard clips of it a lot, and like, yeah.
If this is an actual, because they claim, he's supposedly he's an atheist professor, and he
right.
forces his students to announce the death of God, and like actively, he's like at one point manhandles the Christian student who stands up to, who says no, God's real. And it turns out that he's only an atheist because his wife died,
right? Like,
and then it's like they don't understand. They create these sort of false. It reminds me actually of, it's a bit of an extreme example, but like those old, like you were saying earlier, like those old early 20th century films where it's like someone who's obviously just like a mocked up version of like in Birth of a Nation, like where it's someone blackface is the black person, and they make him a buffoon and just an obviously like racist stereotype, but it's a caricature, and they do the same thing in their media to then impose that onto real life, right?
Yep.
When you see a left-wing politician, it's akin to the buffoon we saw in God's Not Dead or any of the other bog standard like persecution complex films. Yeah,
because they don't actually engage with our ideas. That's the thing, right? Like, they have no idea what we actually think. They just, they just go, oh, well, you're a communist, then you're an authoritarian moron or whatever, right? Like, they have no idea what actually the theory of communism entails. So they can't engage with it. They have to create the straw man buffoon of the character.
I suppose that's also why it sort of explains why the media outlooks become so hostile, right? Like, they have to, because if you're going to say that left-wing people are evil and they want to just destroy the way of life and destroy the American family and all of this just hyperbole, they can't then do as previous Republicans did, where of course they still disagreed and it still weren't nice, but you're not going to see Trump act like Bush did, where he's sort of happy to be civil and be amongst Democrats and have unilateral stuff. And that's not to say that Bush was some like good obviously not. Obviously we're not going to defend Bush, and certainly even Clinton and Obama, the sort of his contemporaries, right? Like, we're not going to either say this is where it should be civil politics, because they weren't civil. Actions both in America and abroad were not anything that we would consider civil.
That's right.
In the sense that the paradigm shift has encouraged toxic behavior and open vitriol, and even amongst Republicans. I mean, you only have to look at how the second a Republican says, actually, hold on a minute, maybe Trump shouldn't be just openly breaking laws and openly, like demonizing just the whole American legal system, they're like kicked out. They're not in the sort of main body of power anymore.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's you can see it as a progression, right? Like, you can go like, oh, well, Bush was very conservative. He did the war in Afghanistan, he's like not a good guy. But then it's gotten, even the Democrats that came after him, they just continually moved to the right, I thought. And then now it's so far that way that you almost can't have a discussion with somebody on that side without being like, but you're not living in reality.
I think and then that circles back too, because when you say that then almost justifies to them, this person is also not living in reality. And you have to the uninitiated person who is maybe has some sense of justice and stuff, but is trying to switch off from politics. You've got two people essentially saying the same thing. One of them is right, but when the people like us who are openly critical of American capitalism aren't going to be given the hot ticket onto CNN or CBS, whatever. Whereas the like deranged, deluded, like someone like Marjorie Kelly Green. Is it? I always forget her name. Is that her actual name? Is it Taylor Kelly Green?
Taylor, Taylor Green.
Yeah. Someone like her who's just openly, like, if you read the stuff she did, like out of like, you would just think she was some crackpot, delusional, someone you'd see in like a flat Earth YouTube comment section or something. Just someone who's utterly like removed from reality. and yet they're a sitting member of government, and they're they're
Yeah.
regularly on all forms of media platforms. They have to be given that airtime because they're a sitting member of state, and they're just not in the reality. Like, they don't engage with facts as we know them.
Yeah,
Like,
that's your Alex Jones kind of effect, right? Like, because as this political window has moved, he's gotten more and more popular, and people take him more and more seriously. Like, I remember back when he was, not new, but like not as well established as he is now by any stretch. And like some of my friends would listen to Alex Jones and be like, this is just a joke, right? Like, this is hilarious. And over time, people like fully take that shit seriously. And it's just like,
because it gets normalized, right? Like
yeah.
We have in the UK, we have a relatively new news channel called GB News, Great Britain News, and it's basically as close to Fox News as you can get. They've been, not sued. They've been reported and charged and fined by Ofcom, who's our regulator, who, by the way, is still, as with anything, is still far more to the right than truly. If they're really being neutral, then they'd be doing a lot more. But they've GB News have had hit all these fines, and yet they're now part of the media landscape, and they're invited to Keir Starmer's press conferences, and they're treated like an actual independent verifier of facts, even though obviously not. But I feel like because so many sort of liberal types, the way liberal discourse has sort of formed, where from the very start, right? Like, all sides can be heard through rational debate, and when you present all ideas, our rational, enlightened minds will be able to deduce what is the best. And it's a nice idea in theory. I'd love to exist in a world where we could all just sit and just work out what's the best. But it's divorced from, the fact that, as we said earlier, capitalism exists, and it's going to invest time and money into making sure certain ideas are disproportionately elevated, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the climate change thing, right? Like, where they used to go like, oh, well, we have to show both sides, even though the side that accepts that climate change is real is like all the scientists that cover climate in the entire world. and the guys that don't are like oil company shills who have like no credentials at all.
It's so funny you say that, because I had an awful comment conversation with. So I made as well as my sort of streams, I do like little mini videos basically on just the odd topic. Usually it's just like a vlog type sort of, I don't want to say ramble, but basically I just freeform me saying my thoughts. But sometimes I do like more scripted ones. Anyway, I did one on Nigel Farage's party, Reform UK, who are far right and awful. They've taken over Lincolnshire Council, which is a county on the East Coast, one of the most flood hit places in the country, basically projected to be like underwater if things, well, because it floods so often, like it's all just marshland, and naturally because our country is very badly organized, we just built all this stuff on it, and not invested in proper flood defenses. Anyway, the flood committee they had's been shut down by their council, which is now controlled by Reform, who are funded by the oil companies you just mentioned. I made a video on this. I eventually basically said they're not good, bad for the climate, bad for people. Some guy showed some of the comments, and he's like, you're just accepting what the media have told you to. You got to always question the science. And I'm like, well, the scientific consensus is that climate change is real. There's I've put some sources in the description. Well, those sources aren't the truth. Here's some actual ones. And it's like the sources he listed were discredited former climate scientist, Trump aide who also worked for BP, and some like military contractor, and then like some climate scientist who wrote an article like saying it's tricky to publish stuff sometimes because you've got to you got to tailor stuff to like a media climate, and he was taken out. They reported it as him saying, "I've got to fake data to get it reported." So all the sources just like not saying at all, like fake or not saying what he did, but this person, for several comments in a row, is just like adamant that I've been like brainwashed and that the climate crisis like isn't happening. Like, and you've got to try and convince this person to engage in reality and like in politics, whilst they're just inundated with this garbage.
And how do you even do that? Like that's always my roadblock is like I get to the point where I'm like, how am I supposed to communicate reality to you? Like,
I mean, I feel like in a similar sense to how I always can think of like the injustice of the past that were overcome. So civil rights movement, lots of people, Martin Luther King famously wasn't very liked at the time. People thought he was going too far, that it was going to hurt the cause of Black Americans,
right,
that, you know, they were just unruly and going to disrupt things too much. And that was like the moderate position amongst all of racism and just blatant, you know, stick to segregated life Black Americans. And now he's got holiday named after him. He's like basically only like the most overt racists will criticize him. Even the racists like have to, you know, still say, yeah, well, why don't you be more like MLK? Like he, you know, so that sort of shows that if you do good things and act properly, you can change people through their environment. Like I almost think it's worth more. Like why would we wait to convince the person who's been like utterly useless? Exactly, right? Like we don't have, not only do we not have the time with the climate crisis, but we've also, you know, like there's also so many people who, like, you know, for one, people want to have action on the climate, right? Every poll basically shows that people not only want action, but are fed up with governments basically just saying, yeah, the climate crisis exists, and then sort of saying platitudes, like, you know, signaling to it, and then not really doing anything about it.
Yeah, your soft climate denial.
Yeah, like it's almost like there's almost like that expectation that the government thinks, well, someone will do something and it will be done because it's an issue. It's like it will happen because it needs to happen, not we need to make it happen.
Right. Yeah.
And I think then people then sort of tune out of it, right? Like when, I don't know about you, but like when Keir Starmer speaks, I don't feel enthused. Like I'm not. I mean, it's bad enough for all we ever, like, you know, the fact that he's like basically just a sort of a conservative, just wearing a Labour,
right.
But you know, when you're in bed with various nefarious funding sources, when you're committing to transphobia and all the other horrible stuff he's done, like it's hard to take seriously when he says, "Yeah, we're going to invest in green energy."
Right.
It's a shame because, you know, it's tricky to you because, like, for as bad as for as underwhelming and ineffective as liberal, you know, capitalism has been, and how sort of centre left, centre right parties have sort of, you know, as you said, drifted right. There are still people within those organisations that do, you know, act and do want stuff, right? Like we've got a politician called Ed Miliband in the UK. He's our current climate secretary, you know, person in charge of the green energy shift we're meant to be having. He genuinely does, you know, take the time to try and think about what we can do in the country. You know, Britain's got a lot of things that would be not too difficult to implement, which would massively help our renewable energy. We've got a lot of coastline. You know, we're in a very good position with a Gulf Stream from the Caribbean. You know, there's wind power, hydroelectric power, tidal power, loads of things we could do quite quickly to help shift us away from fossil fuels. But it's lost in the sea of nonsense that liberal parties have to commit themselves to, right? Because they're not only do they have to pretend like, well, we're a balance of left and right, which naturally means they're including the right wing nonsense, but they're also stuck to markets too much. They can't imagine saying, no, private industry is not doing enough. We're going to, as the government, step in and, you know, actively take control of the situation. They can't fathom that.
Yeah, and even when they do, like we had the carbon tax here for a while. It's gone now, except for some that's still on industrial stuff, I guess. But that's a neoliberal, like, kind of half measure, right? Like it's something, so then they can say, "Oh, we did something," but it doesn't reduce emissions by anyway. So ultimately, it isn't a solution. But then they hang their hat on that and they say, "Well, we did this thing,"
and then that fuels the sort of, I almost said skeptic there, the denying side.
Yeah.
You know, because they'll be like, oh, well, you've done this and nothing's really changed. And then that adds to their general, because the other issue is when you have a right-wing media outlet, you're encouraged to think uncritically and react with emotions and react with emotions is a bad way of phrasing that. React in a irrational impulse first. What do you feel in this moment? Don't think about it, just act on it, right?
Yeah.
So they say they pick the worst image of climate change narratives and then say, well, this hasn't happened yet for you right now, so the whole thing's a hoax. You haven't been washed away by rising sea levels right this second, so it's all a myth.
Yeah, that was the thing too for so long. Like the big climate change discussion was around Al Gore's movie, but he went around the country in private jets. Therefore, climate change was a hoax. And you go, those two things actually aren't as connected as you think they are.
that sort of fallacious argument is just rife across. Like if you, I almost feel like I remember thinking years ago there should be like a fact checking body, just like on any news program or any sort of outlet that should be mandatory, independent, and it's just like academic types who can just come and sit and analyze stuff and say this is a bad argument because they have not addressed this, or this, if it was someone saying that, they'd say there's no, someone can take a private jet and also highlight climate issues.
Yeah,
but you'd be doing it so frequently that it would it would be like every sentence, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I was talking to my kids, my daughter and her boyfriend actually a little while ago, and we got talking about somebody like Charlie Kirk. And like I just said, well, he just lies. Like he lies so many times that it's impossible to debunk all of them before, people are convinced by them. And like 80% of what he says is nonsense. But it feeds people's confirmation bias, and then somehow those of us who care about reality and facts, we're supposed to like go through and spend the time and research and debunk everything he says.
Exactly. I'm just going to draw my curtain just because the sun was exploding a second ago on my screen.
That's good.
Is that a little bit better? Is that not like the sort of nuclear bombs just gone off outside the window?
Yeah, it's not quite so bright there. Yeah.
But no, exactly, right? Like, and there's so many, like Charlie Kirk. It frustrates me because like I've always, when I do my streams, obviously I'm not like at all, I would never say I'm some like big voice or anything, like, just an average person. But I've always thought I try not to go to the massive, I'd rather not speak to huge right-wing personalities and such, because it's their career to be a wrong right-wing person, right? Like Charlie Kirk. If Charlie Kirk's like, if he said one day, actually hold my hands up, I made a few mistakes here, his career's done, right? Like he's not going to get paid by all his oil company sponsors and all the sort of Republican affiliated backers. He's not going to be invited to any more of the university campus stuff, because why? Like you don't. The appeal is that it's some big bravado debate match, and his reputation's in the trash, right? He's lost. What's he been doing for a decade? If he just turns around and says,
actually, I was wrong.
So they're like monetarily incentivized just to keep it up forever, basically. Yeah. Which is also why so many of them are just like the second one thing stops, like the second one drift, like I think you call it, like one trend ends, the next one starts.
Yeah, they have to move right on.
Yeah, like when DEI and woke stops being as popular to just not popular. When it stops being as easily identified, they'll move on to some other buzzword to
Yeah, well, I mean that's the reason it was politically incorrect, and then there was what else? And then it was like social justice warriors.
Critical race theory was
That's right, critical race theory, and they have to keep going with different things because eventually the facts do come out, and people realize like, oh, actually, critical race theory wasn't anything to do with elementary schools.
Soy was another one. That was soy.
I think that one got debunked pretty quick because that was obviously nonsense.
It's just ridiculous. Like, I mean, it's alarming now though, because like, look at the new health center. Like, because I always thought there's always been sort of pseudoscientific dietary stuff in those sort of centers. But now with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. As the health secretary, just it's a whole new level. Was he drinking raw milk the other day?
Oh my god!
Like, and it's just that. That's just something that happens now. That's a senior member of government.
Yeah, like actually in charge of the health stuff in the government, and he's out here peddling like the worst nonsense. Yeah,
It's shocking. I mean, we had that in the UK to some extent as well. Like we had the vaccines give you autism scare was originated by a
right.
fraud in the UK. He's no longer a doctor. He's been disbarred a lot for quite a
Yeah,
number of years now. But that cultural impact still has a legacy, right?
yeah,
You look at our current climate denying government figures in obviously reform, but plenty in the Tory party, plenty even really in the sort of more moderate parties who are happy to take money from oil to
yep,
to say, well, we can't phase out fossil fuels yet. We've got to keep going, got to keep
yeah,
handing out more contracts to drill. It's not good.
yeah. It's like even the delay on like a just transition in jobs from oil field jobs to like other green energy sector jobs, like even that has been used and delayed by uh, lobbyists for oil, and then those same words have been put in the mouths of quote unquote progressive politicians, right? Like we have we have in Canada, we have the Conservative Party who sucks. We have the Liberal Party who are conservatives, and we have the NDP who are kind of liberalish with a couple progressive ideas. And you're like, well, who's even like actually fighting for like a better world in any way? And it's just the answer is none of them.
Well, it's shocking, right? I mean, it's the fact that you can, in the same way that you can buy a car or a TV, you can buy a political party.
Yeah,
you can obviously it's abstracted. It's not a direct transaction. It's not as though they've gone to their credit card and swiped it. They have funded the political campaigns of senior politicians who then advocate for the interest of capital,
yep,
namely continue, with your rubbishy free market economics and privatization
yeah.
and oil drilling.
Well, and that's your think tanks too, right? Like you're in Canada, the Fraser Institute, and in the U.S. you've got whatever the Chicago
The
School of
Cato Institute, isn't it?
Cato. Yeah, they've got Cato. That's right. Like it's just like what are we supposed to like? All this money is going against anything that is even close to progressive on climate change, on social issues, and it's like I don't know. I guess it's just frustrating, right? Because you feel like they've got all this money and stuff to media outlets and like huge platforms, and they get on like CNN and all that shit to just spread misinformation, and you go like, we're just like small YouTubers trying to tell people reality.
I mean, I feel like it shows the importance of like on a larger scale, like worker movements and
Yeah, that's right.
unionizing and being in a collective, using your labor and withdrawing labor to
Yeah,
affect capital, right? To ultimately the reason they in every country have tried to stop protesting rights and the right to strike and all those cornerstones of a
yeah,
functioning society is because it does have an effect when it is used properly. Especially with the current political climate, right? Like there's a lot of, despite the narrative you get from the media, from like when the Trump election happened, I remember you read all this stuff saying, yeah, Trump is just everyone voted for him. He's got a lot of support. Well, it's not quite that. A lot of people do support him, but there's a much bigger majority, a much bigger population who don't. But because
yeah,
there's no coverage, there's no there's decreasing rights to strike and protest,
yeah,
and it's like separate like what's it called it's not as concentrated as like everyone in one state voted against Trump as everyone there is. It's like it's pockets of people with different
yeah,
lives and different schedules. Like it's tricky to, especially in late capitalism when everyone has to work so much to be able to get by and people are
yeah,
busy and tired and demotivated. Like it is a lot of things to deal with to
for
to bring
sure.
things together. But through existence, even in a small way, even little conversations like this, the ball can slowly roll, right?
Yeah, and I mean you can see there is like a growth of this stuff. Like I just covered on the latest episodes of Loose Wires. We talked a lot about we talked about the May Day stuff. And there was thousands of actions across the world, and like hundreds in just the US, with thousands and thousands of people who were protesting on May Day, even though that's not the US Labor Day, right? But yeah, like it is a growing thing. More and more people are on board with like, hey, we're the ones who are building the world, and the people above us are just profiting off of it.
And I think that's the key, right? Like there is global, discontent. I was reading about the Argentinian students who are currently protesting their awful president, who,
Right.
Linking back to the free market libertarian dreams of capitalism. He Milei, Javier Milei, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that how you say his name? Awful man, by the way. Just like
yeah,
just truly disgusting. But there's been protests there in Turkey. There's been student protests, against Erdogan. In Georgia, there's been worker on the ground protests. Like there's pockets of dissent all across the globe. It's just being like the challenge is coordinating it in a media, and then when our communications are sort of controlled by like Twitter was famously, like when the Arab Spring was happening, it was a massive part of what got people to realize that actually there's a lot of us who can go and protest. And unfortunately, authoritarians have seen that and collaborated with tech providers to make it harder.
No, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, like that's part of why Musk bought it. It's partly ego, right? But it's also because now he gets to control the public square, as they used to say, right? So now that's why cis is a slur on Twitter now. Like, because they have to control every aspect of what we're saying and what we're doing.
And it has the double effect as well of further radicalizing people who might otherwise have been exposed to left-wing ideas earlier, right? If your timeline is just Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, whoever else, libs of TikTok, whatever, just constantly online, constantly hateful right-wing stuff. Of course, it might. Not everyone. I feel like when people say media can affect you, they imagine some guy turning the TV on and just instantly, like, they've gone from neutral to I'm a full conservative. But over time, it affects how you perceive things. Even for left wing people, like, we're not.
That's right.
It's not as though we're like paragons of knowledge and uniqueness. Like, I remember, when we in the UK have currently got our immigrant scare panic going on at the moment, and I was thinking about it the other day. The only times you hear it, from the media at least, like about Syrians or Afghanis or people from the Middle East, is when it's about the immigrant crisis and the scare tactics of they're coming over and do all these awful things. You never hear about, for instance, the Afghanistani cricket team, who are now one of the, like, they've gone from do you know about cricket?
No, not really.
British baseball. No, but like, they've gone from one of the sort of lower ranked nations to now better than some of the test nations I've ever been, top elite teams. Syria, so many academics and artists and scholars come out of Syria, but like there's so much history there. And Damascus is one of the oldest cities in the world. Older than many across the of established West, but you never hear that because there's no time given to it. So like the way it's all covered, changed it. I'm going to draw all my curtains now because this is. I don't know what's going on. Clearly, it's just that time of day. No? Give me a second.
No worries.
Right.
There you go.
All right, that'll do for now.
Yeah, that'll be all right. Yeah, I was thinking, like, it's so it's the media, because for some reason, like, negativity is where people's attention always gets drawn, right? Even online, like, you can post two things. One will be saying, like, hey, here's this great mutual aid action that's happening down the street from me, and you could also say, here, this guy got beat up on the street next door to me, and people are going to pay attention to the one where the guy got beat up, and they're going to say, "Oh no, crime is out of control. Oh my goodness," and they'll completely ignore that people just down the street were also doing complete mutual aid and helping people get food to eat that needed it. Like, so yeah, it's because we've been conditioned to see that, right? At least to some degree. Maybe we always had a natural tendency towards that, seeing the negative instead of the positive, but the media sphere certainly has perpetuated it.
I mean, I've always like, in my mind, human nature is sort of a bit of a mystical property, right? Like, there's no there's no inherent like state of being for any human. Like, we've got obviously, we have a heart and we have various chemical reactions to things, and obviously, like, there's going to be some of that playing into it. But as you say, like, when the news outlets take the time to run 10 different stories about one like criminal incident and ignore a dozen or so examples of positivity in the community, it's a cultivated feeling. Is it? And when it's engineered, so because it can go the other way too. Like, the news are more than happy to portray other elements of society which are more problematic in a positive way. Like, you only have to look at like a military parade. Like, when you see like a military jet fly over, you're meant to think, wow, look how amazing America is, and not that was like $1 billion US taxpayer dollars just.
I wonder which poor nation that one's going to bomb today.
It's shocking, right? I mean, it's been more. I've noticed it more in the UK that we've obviously we've had our nationalist past, right? But
for sure,
increasingly we see the Union flag just everywhere. Labour used to be like their colours were sort of just red, and you'd have like the red rose maybe, but they were never. They'd have a flag sometimes, but it was more understated. And now, like, it's everywhere. On the we had our election last year, obviously, on all the brochures and pamphlets and stuff. The Union flag was there. Keir Starmer makes sure that there's always just two massive standards behind him. And you're meant to, and obviously that's part of the cultural elements of our power structure, right? Nationalism is a big part of the capitalist project. If you believe in the superiority of your nation, you're not thinking about the workers' rights that have been sort of trampled to get there.
That's right. Yeah, you're willing to sacrifice because it's for the good of the nation, right?
And I mean, I wrote for university, actually, separate to my YouTube stuff. I wrote an essay on the history of nationalism and the history of sort of the nation state. And when you analyze it, most of our modern states they're not that old. They're not. Right. We often hear about the intrinsic, British spirit and the American spirit and whatever. But what was Britain today was dozens of kingdoms in the distant past, warring kingdoms that had to be like taken over and assimilated and invaded from overseas, and fought to have their land controlled, and constantly met with insurgencies and rebellious factions. And the idea that you can just wipe all that away and say, we're British people, we have an intrinsic national quality that makes us separate from the rest of the world. Like, it's just nonsense. It's just not true.
No, that's right. Yeah, I just finished reading, like today while I was at the gym, the book called The Operating System, and it's an anarchist theory of the state. And there's a lot of that stuff where he talks about, like, so the state has to create like a core identity group. And in like the United States and Canada and likely UK, you end up with white Christian men as the core identity group, and then they get special privileges and they get to be the superior group because the state needs that to happen for it to maintain its power over the general populace. Absolutely. And it's just like when it's like, yeah, we can look at this happening, right? Like they really just did that.
No, exactly. I mean, I think America is like the perfect example of this, because there could easily have been an alternate history where Americans, they break from the British Empire and they say, right, all of us will coexist and thrive. But that does not serve capitalism. So immediately racial hierarchy is implemented. They say, right, black people are less than a human being. They are property to be used. And all of a sudden America goes from former colony to world power off the backs of, the chattel slavery,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, it's quite the like from an anarchist perspective, it's quite the project to get out of this fucking hole we've dug ourselves in with modern states.
I mean, I feel like it's not the nicest turning point, but in some ways, the climate crisis will force some change.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
there's a risk that change is just full-blown global, like, fascism. But there's also, the idea that at some point, right-wing visions of economy and countries will have to change, because you can't just, you can't just endlessly consume and produce and make profit anyway.
Right.
But you're going to run out of oil. It's a finite resource, and eventually the climate deniers are going to be met with the fact that the oil well is empty, right? At some point you're going to run out of reserves, or they're going to be in places that you can't as easily just go to and get. I mean, obviously the concern is that someone says, well, let's go and sort out Antarctica. It's now free real estate. But I feel like that would also entail some major consequences elsewhere, because the other side of the climate crisis is the global south, which is going to be disproportionately affected by increasing heat temperatures, rising sea levels, food shortages, water shortages. And that is going to mean the current sort of global economic output is not stable, right? Yeah. If you're reliant on, let's be honest, exploitative, unfair trade deals to maintain like Western wealth, then at some, for one, it's not going to last forever. Like if you're exporting tons of natural resources from countries which are going to be just hit with drought and famine, then you've now lost your source of food. But then secondly, there's a lot of people in those countries not going to be happy with what's going on. They might just say, well, too bad, guys, we need to keep more of our resources.
Yep.
See you later, America.
Which they absolutely could have done in the past many times.
Yeah.
Like I think about when South Africa, in the shock doctrine, Naomi Klein talks about South Africa's end of apartheid, and how because of the IMF, they ended up placating to all these fucking neoliberal austerity politics nonsense and keeping the wealth in the hands of largely white landowners.
Yeah.
And they could have just said no, because there's enough stuff in Africa that they could, like in South Africa, they could have, like, they have the resources to be independent of the world economy.
Well, exactly, right? I mean, the IMF is such, and the World Bank, just ghastly. I mean, I remember when you're a kid, like you learn about, sort of, you learn the names, and you think, yeah, it's great that we've got, a world organization dedicated to helping poor nations, and then you find out that the help is loans in exchange for privatizing and handing over resources to some like Nestle.
Yeah,
and
ignoring their slave labor and
it's so gross. But at some point that is going to change, right? Like and as well, on top of that as well, the climate refugees that are going to be created through the climate crisis will force. At some point there will have to be a reckoning with it. Again, the worry is that I remember all those claims of there's a caravan of a million migrants coming to America right this second. That will happen in the future, because if things aren't changed, because as anyone would do, if you're met with 50-degree temperature day and night and your crops just die and there's nothing, of course you're going to move away.
Have you read Ministry of the Future by Ken Robinson?
By who say? I've not, but that was recommended to me by one of the professors.
It's right up there. There's the one, the kind of at the start where they talk about the heat wave in India and the number of people that just die because it's so hot and they can't survive. It's once that's happening in real life, there's going to be a huge migration of people all over to these countries that are sitting here we don't want anybody coming in. Well, maybe you got to do something about fucking climate change then, guys. Give me a break.
And alarmingly, that is also going to be happening, maybe not to the same extent, but in the West as well, right? Another paper paper. I'm not at that stage yet. Another essay that I've written has been about heat emergencies
Okay.
in American cities,
Ah,
and because of the just sheer amount of concrete that is just in like a really concentrated bit of space, the
right.
temperature of many cities is disproportionately higher than like the surrounding area.
Yep.
Um, and so you see in many of the poorer parts of the cities where there's less, there's been less urban planning, the council, the district, we'd call it a council in the UK, but like the local authority has got less funds to like rewild and put like green areas in. So it's just a furnace, right? It's just a
Yeah.
oven. And thousands basically like are dying from this already, like heat related conditions, and then conditions exacerbated by the fact that they're just dehydrated and in unair conditioned homes without air conditioning,
Right.
and don't have can't call the ambulance to because they don't get there in time or because it costs and they can't afford it, and that's only going to get worse, right? And at some point, you can't not report that, say, 1,000 people have been seriously afflicted, or hospitals just basically have to turn people away because they're just,
Yeah.
dogged
Too
down and stuff.
full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
at
Like,
some point, it's going to reach, like, at some point, there has to be something done.
that's right. And actually, yeah, like you say, like there's been a number of people in various, I think it was in BC, in Vancouver. There was people, they had this massive heat wave last year or the year before. And there was a whole bunch of like elderly people passed away because of it. And you go like, well, at what point do you stop? Like, do you care that your grandma might die because of the heat? Like, what are you doing here? Like,
Mm. And it's curious, too, because I think we've seen to some extent that governments can act when they need to. Like when COVID, was sweeping through,
yep,
the West, you did see, obviously, it took too long in many cases, and there was a lot of pseudoscience. But at some point, they had to say, okay, we're going to have to put aside all this cultural nonsense. There is a pandemic. We're going to have to make some changes, right? And unfortunately, they've been allowed to get away with the fact that they have, they denied it and promoted pseudoscience. It should have been anyone who was, claiming that, oh, we can't do anything, it's not real, just, I don't know, drink raw milk or whatever. Like, those guys should have been kicked out and put in front of a tribunal. But instead, they've been allowed to just swan around and back in government.
Yeah, if any faith I had that the government would do anything useful kind of died with COVID. Because it's amazing how much they put the interests of profit-making industries ahead of the well-being of their citizens. Even in Canada, we had like a kind of a lockdown for a little while, but they got us out there working as fast as they could. And, and they just said, oh, well, wear a mask. Oh, we'll put arrows on the fucking grocery store floors. Like, we can't have you not shopping, so we'll have to make sure that you can shop. Like,
it's staggering.
Yeah.
We also had our, Prime Minister lost his job basically in the back of his antics in COVID, Boris Johnson. But that was the most sort of, I think you can't disguise having a party when the lockdown's going on, and like all the pictures were pretty bad.
Yeah.
But equally as bad was the money that just vanished into like private contracts for orchestrated by conservative ministers. Never saw that money again. Just things like that. And then also like the fact that the health service that had to deal with this pandemic had been, ravaged by austerity.
Right. Absolutely.
The consequence of right-wing policy made the impact of COVID much worse than it needs to have been, right? Because diseases happen, ultimately we're humans, we've got biological systems, eventually there's going to be threats to it. Yep. But a society with our resources has the potential of managing it much better than what we saw. It doesn't have to be this big, like, society changing thing. We could just deal with it in a way that serves us properly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like so at the start of COVID, I fully envisioned like a care system where the government takes care of its citizens, and we all, we work in shifts or whatever. We come up with a system so that we can, all be okay. And it just didn't happen that way at all. And I don't know, it could have been something great, but it didn't have to be something great. It could have just been, like you say, average, regular management, as long as you didn't fuck it up. But, but they couldn't even do that.
Like, it's terrible. I mean, the COVID lessons have and haven't been learned. Because I think, as you've said, we can clearly identify that, the sort of the seeds of like far right pseudo-scientific stuff are there, and they're happy to do what they like and not care. But equally, there was, people did do what they needed to, they did lock down. They did, take actions to help the community and such. Like, part of me was worried that when they said, "Oh, we've got to lock down," people was going to be like, "Nah," and just not at all.
At least like regular people did what needed to be done.
No,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
and it's like all those. I mean, you must have seen a few like zombie films and stuff where just people are absurdly like selfish and awful, and like we can clearly see that is along political lines, right? If you're right wing, you're more susceptible to misinformation and sort of selfish actions and like eugenics rhetoric, where you're saying, "Oh, we'll just let the vulnerable die and we'll be fine." Like, and those who are of a more, I don't know, like left-wing conscientious mind, who do exist in society in good number, were able to, respect the fact that we're in a pandemic and we have to suspend some of our usual freedoms to make sure we don't, suffer.
Yeah. Just the acknowledgement that we actually do have a responsibility to the people we share our society with. Like, it exists. People do have that acknowledgement. Not enough. But they're...
I think that's one of the central problems with the right, though, isn't it? Like, there's no, for as much as they love talking about, "Oh, you're your own man, you got to be, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps," there is no accountability. They just say whatever they want in the moment, and if they're wrong, say the next thing. And that's how so many obvious chances and frauds have basically like survived through controversy after controversy. Like, you often see like a tweet where it's like, back in the day, someone lying about this would have ruined them. But that's because the right have made it no longer necessary to be scandal free. Scandal is like basically the norm.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty wild.
Just shocking.
Yeah.
But what were you gonna say, Zan? Sorry.
I was just thinking, like, it's like I don't want to refer to it as juvenile, because children often have more thought and care for others than right wingers do. But I don't know. I don't have a good word for it, because it is, in a sense, like an immature, like, I get to do whatever I want and I never have to account for it and nobody can tell me what to do.
Yeah, but
kind of attitude.
Like, it's like children, as you say, like, a child learns from what is around them, right?
Yeah.
So just as a child can act like that sort of stereotypical, like, I think of like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory kids, right? Like,
right.
Like, completely caricatures of selfishness, and they can't see beyond, "Oh, I want the chocolate and I want to be the next." But they're also capable of, realizing through the logics of, being nice to people and such, that there is something important about treating people right and following consistent logic and such, and acting in a manner that isn't hideous and awful. So no, I also share that sort of unease about you just saying, "Oh, they're juvenile and immature," because they are. But I mean, maybe it's that juvenility and well, maybe not juvenile, but immaturity is not age specific. Someone can be an adult and have quite a lot of money and resources and responsibility, and also be an immature person. My history speaking to writing people demonstrates this.
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, it's so, just the fact that someone can just actively say to you, "I am not part. I have no responsibility for everyone but myself. I am, I am free to act how I like. I should have liberty." Blah blah. Like, that is just fundamentally immature, because if they actually followed that, if people actually followed that tenet around them, their life would fall apart. Imagine if someone said, "Oh no, I don't feel like going to work. I'm not gonna turn on the energy power plant today. I'm not gonna grow crops today." I'm like, if they all acted
feel like it.
like, I mean, ironically, capitalism forces all this to happen through its
Yeah.
coercion and cheats the worker out of their proper worth to make their capitalist billions. But if everyone acted like that, it's another sort of projection, right? Like they say that left-wing systems, worker-owned systems would fall apart because people would they're being forced to do stuff they haven't got a choice. What
do you think's happening now?
And these people who claim that the market is liberation and stuff, and that will give them the ultimate divine rights of freedom. But there's no acknowledgement of the fact that you imagine like Amazon in that situation, like they're just right, okay, looks like we're in charge now, guys. We've got no government now. Basically, we are the government.
Like that's even it wouldn't work even if you started from zero, right? Like if nobody had anything to start off with, then it still wouldn't work. But the way they imagine it, but they don't even want to eliminate that. Like they want to leave all the capitalist power systems, the private ownership of the means of production exactly as it is. They just want the government to quit. And then they think that something's going to be better somehow. Like, so Amazon's going to say, no, fuck you, starve or come work for us.
Exactly, right? But it's like, it's that capitalism as religion. They believe that they will be fine. They will work hard, and because of that, they'll become the best capitalist and be sitting with the mansion like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. And they won't be the exploited worker who will be, off to the Amazon warehouse to package goods for the rest of their life.
Yeah, like I'm an anarchist. I am anti-state. I do believe that we can organize ourselves horizontally with people, sharing our goods and showing responsibility for each other and living harmoniously together. I do believe that's a thing we can do. But you still can't have private property. You still can't have the hoarding of resources that we have. You still can't be like, oh yeah, well, we won't have any fucking rules and you can do whatever you want. And if the big guy comes and beats you up and takes your stuff, well, then I guess it's his stuff now. Like, you still have to do stuff about that.
But it speaks to that lack of critical thinking, because these sort of people often, when you point out that capitalist management of the world is not really going very well, and the governments have basically messed up a lot of stuff, they'll say, well, it's not capitalism, it's the government have meddled with it, it's corporate, it's not it's not the true free market and stuff. It ignores that the capitalists who have done this don't care. Like, they're laughing at the idea that these people would give them more power to with less impediment. Because at the moment, right, like for as much as your Amazons and your Walmarts and stuff have just far too much power, they still have to mediate it through government politicians.
That's right.
For as rubbish as like Democrats are, they at least will say, well, you are going to pay some tax with it. You are going to meet some regulations. You can't just be completely
we do have some labor laws.
Just propose ones, guys. It's not too bad, don't worry. But like the second you remove that, there's now nothing. We go back to like, I don't know, 1920s, like Henry Ford, just the private militia come and beat you if you haven't like spent 12 hours on the assembly line this morning.
That's right. I've described it as corporate fascism before. Like, it becomes like rule by monopoly, and like, your biggest companies in the world, they just buy up all the shit and they block off all the roads, because if you're not paying a toll, then fuck you. Like, what do you? It's such an ignorant way of viewing the world. Like, it's very myopic, right? Like, it's very like, I exist and I worked hard to get what I want, but all the extra stuff that happened, that had nothing to do with it.
It's bad too, because it's like, freedom isn't being able to spend time doing what you enjoy, and freedom's not knowing that you've got no matter what happens in the day, you can eat a meal and go to
right.
It's being able to buy one of about 100 different Ford trucks.
Right.
Like, it's,
that's right.
It's being able to choose between 2 different internet providers under 10 different names.
Yeah, like, that's right.
It's being able to choose between a load of deodorants all owned by Procter and Gamble. Like, it's
that's right. Yeah, like we have like if you go to buy glasses, right? Like you have like hundreds of frames that you can choose from. There are only like a dozen companies that make them, and those companies are all part of two bigger companies. But sure, I get to choose from thousands of different frames, so I'm free, right?
But for them, that is freedom. Like the idea that,
Yeah,
they
the freedom
love,
to consume.
yeah, freedom to enjoy the market. What more do you need? And they love their freedom of speech too. Like they love, that's another freedom that they insist they have, even though clearly
Right.
capitalism's a threat to it, right? Because you try being saying openly what you think of your employer's work practices.
Yeah,
Look at all those Amazon workers who got booted out because they tried to unionize.
that's right.
And like sure, Biden tried to make it easier for union activity, but 4 years on, now here's Trump, and he basically is going to get rid of all of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and of course, like freedom of speech is within certain criteria, right? Because people are being imprisoned for speaking out against the genocide in Gaza, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's with freedom of speech within, like, what they mean is I want to be able to say slurs, right?
Yeah,
like
100%. 100%.
Yeah, that's all it is. Like, yeah, you're free to say slurs, but I'm not allowed. I'm not free to say free Palestine.
Yeah, and as with everything else, it's abstracted too, because like they'll say, oh well, that person said this, and they weren't instantly shot or put in prison, but they've lost their job and they've lost their media coverage, and they've now like lost their livelihood, which is a loss of freedom, right? Like they've now, great, you can say what you like, but good luck affording your bills next month. Like it's a faux freedom entirely.
Yeah, and even then, like, yeah, it's just wild. Like, I think of this woman who called a child in the U.S. a slur, and then like she got like hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations.
Yeah. No, I
and
saw
you're like,
that.
So this is this facade of free speech, like this is gone now, right? Like this is all just about being racist. That's what this is.
100%. I mean, I suppose. I mean, God knows what it would be like if you were only consuming like outrage, right wing Twitter and stuff.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I suppose in their mind, it's like, oh, they voiced a different opinion, and she was called a racist. So we've got to save her from the woke mob or whatever. Like it's like with that we had teacher was fired from their job, and you read in the news like, oh, teacher fired for gender critical views, and in actuality, this teacher like insulted, berated, was extremely transphobic to like a kid, and they said they were like going to hell and stuff. Like,
fully verbally abusive.
Like, and it turns out they're also like a safeguarding threat because they've like posted about it on all over social media. So like basically failed entirely at like the sort of whole point of being a teacher. Like they've actively endangered this child. Like, and that's just lost in the sort of coverage of it.
Yeah,
like, it's entirely
cancelled by the woke mob, I guess. Is that counts, right? Unreal.
It's just shocking. But yeah, that whole sense of freedom, like, is just entirely like fabricated. Like in the same way that, oh, I'm a free American citizen because I can fly my flag and pledge allegiance to the flag. Like it's entirely just no, a vacant.
Yeah,
it's a movement absent of logic.
Yeah. I got nothing. It's just like, I'm at a loss at this.
But I mean, that's why it's so important to, even through these times, to continue being just speaking out, being like, because for every even if like 100 people see a left wing thing and say like, yeah, well, it's the woke mob, it's nonsense. One person will sort of have some like framework to go off, because like the interactions of the real world disprove what right wing people believe. Like, when you go into a shop and all the prices of all the stuff in the shop is just much higher than it was, there's something wrong with just letting the free market work itself out. you know there needs to be more than just allowing Walmart to just dictate what you pay for the things you need to live, right?
For sure. Because you watch the prices go up and the profits go up, and you can buy less and less food, and you're like everybody, even conservatives, even right wingers, know if I can afford less and less food while the profits are going up at this grocery store chain, well, then something's wrong, right? it's, how am I, less important than their profit? And at least everybody that I talk to in real life recognize.
Yeah, like I think that's the thing as well. Like it's a very coerced right wing media outlet, because like for as much as they love to say, oh, the youth are going right wing and everyone's realizing the woke mind virus is not a lot of thing. Like the people you speak to don't either they're very quiet about it, or they people don't actually generally think like this. Like which is evidenced by the fact that people don't the voting patterns that don't support widespread right wing love. It's managed democracy. It's not like a full thing. Like even in the UK, Reform are polling first in the polls with like 25% of people who vote, which is not famously people don't vote in elections because they're so fed up and disenfranchised, right? So there's a lot of ground for improvement potential.
Yeah, and you can see that even like in the US too, because they I don't know, it was like a pretty decent percentage of their people voted in the presidential election last year, but it was still not everybody.
Less than half, right?
It was still pretty low if you think about how many voting people there are, and it's because of that, because not that many people buy into all of the rhetoric, right? Or are even politically engaged. So many people are disenfranchised because they see both parties as being too close, too similar, or not standing for themselves or what they believe in, or that kind of thing. Like we have a similar thing here in Saskatchewan. We had like a provincial election last year sometime, and it was like less than half of the people who could have voted, and so then we have the same party in power for the last 18 years, but that's because the rest of us don't feel like we have a chance at anything.
No, exactly. We recently, the other element of it is also just the intentional disenfranchisement. It's harder to vote now than it was in the past. Like we in the UK have recently, as of the last election, have voter ID laws. Which means that you need to produce ID to vote. And it's one of those ideas, but maybe if you think about it for like 1 second, it's like, you should be expected to show who you are. And then you realize that there's like 2 cases ever of voter fraud happening in the way they describe it. And when you look at what counts as ID, like so you need your passport, obviously, driver's license, sure. And then it's like a load of like things that only over 65s who tend to vote right wing and conservative can use. You can't. I couldn't use my student ID to vote in the last election.
No.
I couldn't use my train line discount ticket ID.
Okay.
You can't use all the things that people who don't vote conservative would be more likely to own. So younger people things aren't allowed. And it's even worse in America, where it's like do some stupid voter ID test to be able to vote.
Right.
Byzantine laws. You have to vote at certain times. They'll have like a city district and be like one voting station for like thousands of people. You have to queue around the block. I read the most shocking thing. Some elections, obviously, in like the deep south, it's a bit warmer. It's not quite as pleasant to stand around just in the sun on a path, just in ages. People distribute water. That's now illegal. You can't do that in lots of places.
You can't share water on
It's so like just blatantly corrupt, and like, the idea of you could say this is a fair, free election. I mean, look at the last. They chucked like 1 million voters off the ballot list right before the 2024 election in America.
Yeah,
but Trump won fairly.
No, it's I mean, the U.S. maybe is worse than other places, but like their whole gerrymandering thing, where they like can draw the districts in certain ways, like, and you see the wild shapes they've got just to avoid having any black people in the fucking voting district. And it's like, I don't know. Obviously that seems fucking fucked up, like super corrupt to me. Like, I don't know.
The frustrating thing is when you say like the US is a fundamentally corrupt nation. That sounds like all the conspiracy stuff we were talking about earlier. Like, because they also say the same thing, but when they say it, it's like Biden invited 1 million Mexicans to vote in the election,
right?
And then they all vanished like afterwards and stuff.
Yeah, they're talking about demonstrably untrue things. Where we're like saying like, no, but like look at where the money is and look at what's happening with like actual stats and like the real gerrymandering and the judicial corruption and like literally bribing Supreme Court justices.
God, Clarence Thomas. Like I'm amazed that, I mean, I remember I was born in 1998. I'm a little bit too young for like the sort of 90s cartoons. But even, the cartoons I'd watch, like Ninja Turtles and stuff, and Power Rangers, you'd have like villains who'd be like just caricatures, like some oil tycoon who wants to, make people drink oil and stuff, and like just some obvious cartoon villain. And then you look at some people who are in the US government and, the courts and stuff, and they're just like these oil baron, like people who've flown to like Saudi Arabia and come back with like Rolex watches and new Rolls Royces, and then suddenly they're like, oh well, it's not too bad to let these people just
go
drill forever. Corporations aren't so bad, it's tax free.
That's right.
But there's also that just structural corruption, which is so ingrained, but it's like to criticize it is to criticize America in general. Like for felons cannot vote. Felons have no rights whatsoever. They are slaves as defined by the Constitution, right? Slavery is not for anyone apart from the incarcerated. 13th Amendment.
That's right.
Excuse me. Because of that, how many Americans are incarcerated right now? Like the most of any country in the world. And none of them can vote.
That's right. They're completely disenfranchised from voting, and then like you say, it's so much free labor for the corporations and the companies that that get them to do random stuff. And then they do, like in California, they fight fires and stuff. They're used as like dangerous work that is deeply valuable, but then they can't go get jobs doing that after the fact.
Yeah. It's staggering. Because like in some way, I mean, obviously the idea of the best solution to crime, which in itself is a product of our capitalist, failings. Yeah. The idea that the best solution is just to take someone and put them in a box and lock them up and just leave them there for decades. Like it is just absurd. But then there's also the fact that like rehabilitation could do, you giving people jobs to do in the community would be a good way of rehabilitating someone. Saying, okay, you've got a bit too far out of what is acceptable. We're going to give you some structure. We're going to put you in, one of these positions. And then afterwards, you can transition into some sort of role once you leave. You've got that option for you. And not, because like and again, we often fall into the trap of sort of idealizing like the Nordic countries and the sort of Scandinavian.
Right.
It's like they've got their flaws, but
for sure,
their prisons do more to at least like say, let's actually like try and work with this person before we just like condemn them to the cells forever.
Like you say, like we don't want to say this is perfect, but when you compare it to the U.S. or Canada or a state that just throws people into a cell and then says forget about them, like obviously that's a better system. Like obviously if you have rehabilitation and like these people the recidivism rates aren't like anything like the United States. Obviously they're doing something right where the US is doing something wrong.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the UK, we as with everything, we're sort of only a few steps behind the US. We've seen privatisation increase massively in our prison service over the last, basically since Thatcher, but increasingly with the last Conservative government, there was a big drive with it. And lo and behold, private prisons are worse run, poorly. The staff there are hired on quick, cheap contracts, so they're just in and out. And you can imagine that encourages sort of less rehabilitative work and more sort of just yell and shout.
And they're more expensive.
Yeah, it's so that I think that is sort of the obvious counter to all the idea that the free market will run it more effectively. It costs more. Throwing together these cheaply run prisons inevitably leads to decay and badly operated stuff.
Yeah.
and as well, like they don't think about the effect this has on the whole system too. That's the other sort of one of the other major problems with right wing thinking is that there's no consideration for what the ripple effect of an action is. So when you take money out of city urban projects and councils and libraries, schools, recreation centres, sports, there's a vacuum. Crime is more, especially when you combine it with poverty and job losses and such. Poverty leads to crime. Crime leads to more arrests, which the police departments and judges are paid for, like not paid per arrest, so they're incentivized to show up and create a load of crime. Basically, you walking in the wrong place, gonna have to arrest you. Bail is $1,000. Can't afford that. Off to the jail
That's
you
called
go.
Loitering. Now it's loitering. Yeah.
Off to jail. Your court case isn't for 6 months, but what you're gonna we're charging you to stay in the cell, so you're gonna have to work for us. Oh look, you're now in prison. Like it's awful. It's so just blatantly broken. And
it's corrupt in every way. Oh man, yeah.
No, it's not.
But we've been talking for about an hour and a half.
Yeah, we have. So, it's as fun as it has been. I've started to do a few coughs. My throat's getting a bit dry.
No, that's all right. So I guess, where can people find you?
So I'm under this name, Owen MacDonald, on YouTube, on Twitter. Don't post that as much anymore, but I'm still there. So I've got 8 on the end of my name there. Blue Sky under the same name, and I don't think I've actually used my Twitch account in years, but I'm there too. So if you want, follow me there too. But yeah, mainly YouTube. I do all sorts of streams, and we have a great time.
Yeah, no, like I say, I've been on your channel. It was a fun discussion, and I think what you're doing it's valuable, even if I don't subject myself to right-wing perspectives very much.
Well, you will live a longer and happier life than myself.
Well, we'll see. I don't. All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me on. You take care.